Hi there, hi everyone.
Morning.
I have to introduce myself and not hit the microphone while I'm doing it. My name is Jane Root. I run Utopia these days. Utopia is perhaps best known for making big shows with the likes of Chris Hemsworth and those kind of people. But before that, I ran the Discovery channels in America, where I still live. And before that, I was controller of BBC Two, which is where I met this man, Andy Wilman.
Yep.
And unless you've been living under a rock for 25 years, you'll be very familiar, I'm sure, with Jeremy Clarkson, with Richard Hammond, with James May. You know those guys. The person that you might not know is the fourth Beatle, as I kind of...
Fourth Beatle. I know, I'll go Pete Best, actually. Is anybody old
Pete
enough?
Best, yeah.
Yeah, Pete Best.
Well, so Pete Best here, he's here today because I personally think that he's one of the great craftspeople of our era of television.
I do too.
Yeah. He's actually made he's been behind three incredible global hits in the reimagined Top Gear, in Grand Tour and Clarkson's Farm, all of which are kind of surprising, and we're going to talk about them all in a minute. But just to get us in the mood, I wanted to show you a little clip from something that is one of my absolute favourite shows at the moment, which is Clarkson's Farm.
Yeah, we'll sort of, if you want to bring your breakfast up, we've got the clip for you.
Yeah, let's have a look.
It's Jeremy doing pig sex, and the pig's the one with the four legs. So.
So how did a show about farming in damp, muddy Cotswold fields
I know.
become a...
Global. Have you heard about it? It's big in China.
Really?
Yeah. There's like, I read this thing in one of the papers that people who live in like cities in China like shows about the countryside and farming. And for some reason, they've latched on to Clarkson's Farm. So it's got a big cult following in China, which, who knew? But I like the idea that the Chinese think every farmer in Britain is like got his own car show. He's a bit mental and he fucks everything up that he goes near. That's their impression of British farmers. But that level of globalness, yes, we never expected any of it. We were so nervous when we made that show.
If I was still running BBC Two, I'd have said like maybe you could get away with like a half hour, 7:30 before Gardener's World.
But I'd gone daytime.
You know, maybe daytime, but like it is just extraordinary that you can take those people doing that thing.
Yeah. And I think a bit like some of the elements of Top Gear, there's nothing we can claim. There was a lightning in a bottle effect going on. Like that cast, nobody was ever auditioned. Charlie, Lisa, Gerald, they're all there. They're all doing what they normally do. And then now the show runs, they have not lost any, they've not got any interest in TV. Like Charlie never watches the show. Gerald can't believe his luck because all he's ever done for the last 10 years is wander over to Jeremy and talk to him. And now he gets a check for doing the same thing. And he was telling me like, when the first series went out, he got stopped by the police, like blue lights, the whole thing, and he was like, oh, fucking hell, I've had a drink. And the police came around and wanted a selfie, and he didn't know what selfie was. So you have this very charming, I'd say, darling buds thing going on. And I think one of the elements there is it's a very innocent setting in a sort of where small stories happen. And Jeremy's very happy with small stories because we don't have that Top Gear or Grand Tour pressure of we've got to blow a dam up or something like that to get anybody to notice. You know, we did a film the other day about buying £25 willow trees, and we're like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, who actually would be interested in this? But it is actually lovely. And and I think we got lucky with COVID because everyone was watching a nice, homely, cozy little environment when they were all stuck at home. And we hit the spot with all those things, but the nerves at the beginning were shocking.
But I have to ask you, and this is the real TV question, is how much of it is set up? How much of it is, because some things, the other day I was saying to you about the giant machine to harvest the blackberries. I was like, nobody really does that, do they? And you were like, no, that's for real. But what are your rules about
What went wrong was for
authenticity?
real. You're right, nobody would hire that really unless they really kind of wanted to make some TV. But what went wrong was for real. And we had this kind of rule when we started making the first series that Jeremy and I talked about, was like, okay, let's say to each other, if we have an idea and would it work on the Grand Tour or does it belong on the Grand Tour, maybe we shouldn't do it for the farm. And in the main, we've kept to that. So everything that happens just happens like that. You know, you can't tell a pig, right, Jeremy's going to be funny about biscuits, and you wander over there, you shag that one, and then you can't do that. So nothing compared to, obviously, our other shows is like orchestrated, which is just joyful. And because he doesn't know what he's doing, and because small stuff like him making blackberry jam can make TV, and Charlie coming in and going, have you filled out all your health certificates? You get giggles from that. We don't actually need to set anything up. You plant all the mushrooms hoping that there'll be an infestation and they'll all die, you know, because the odds are there. But other than that, we've never set anything up. And
So you kind of plan the big things and then just let it go.
Yeah, you're right. If we're going to build a car park or something like that, and you've got big machinery, he knows fuck all about anything mechanical. So you assume that things will go wrong there. And because he can't listen or he's got no patience, then he'll just start driving something. And then next thing you know, it's in a pond. And you're like, phew. But no, we don't set anything up, and it makes us so happy that we don't have to.
The thing that I always think's interesting is that he's a journalist in his brain,
Yeah.
in the middle of that. And so if you were working with an actor in like the pig scene, there would be a like, stop, let's reset, let's do it again. But he
No, his brain
kind of
is so
knows
fast.
in the moment.
He's like, if he's got all the others around him, Caleb, Lisa, Gerald, whatever, he's still, his brain, you can just see it turning over. Like, he knows there's a scene he's got to kind of conduct and orchestrate. Points have got to land, and he knows it's got to go somewhere. And his like mental, as you say, his tabloid journalist capacity is quite extraordinary, because that's how he began. That's how we first knew him. He was a print journalist. And that's never left him. So he knows that things kind of have to have a point. And then when something happens, like there was, I think a big turning point was when Caleb bollocks him in that first episode of the first series. And it's a kid who's never really watched the Grand Tour, starts bollocking him for screwing up the thing. Jeremy's face is like, oh, this is brilliant. So he knows what to do. He knows to just shut up and not argue. And if it was Richard and James, he would know that he's going to argue back. But with a 23-year-old kid that doesn't really know him, bollocking him, he's like, right, you've had your ankles ripped off, just stand there and take it, and that'll be the best TV.
I mean, the other thing that's kind of now seems completely obvious, but I think you must have thought about at the beginning, is that Jeremy's not poor, right? He's not,
I thought he was. He keeps telling me he is.
But you...
Always broke.
Always broke.
Whenever we get to the pub, he's like, oh, fuck.
Yeah. But you believe the financial, you know, I think for a lot of people watching across the world in some ways, understanding the finances of farming actually kind of comes through. And
yeah, and we had a big discussion about that, because it was like, everybody knows you've got a few quid and you've got other jobs, you've got the Grand Tour, you've got Millionaire, etc. And we thought, right, so remember back in your day, there's Trouble at the Top, and those kind of business ones that Robert Thurkel did, those brilliant business ones where there's people are betting their house on their venture. We knew that we couldn't have that, but we just decided that if we're upfront about the fact that we can always constantly remind people that Jeremy's got money, so that he's not going to like be living in a ditch if these things go wrong. But then, because we remind people enough that he's not a farmer like that, and he's got the communication skills to go, what if you are a real farmer and you haven't got a millionaire job, etc., etc. And because he can communicate, then other farmers now go, thank you for highlighting what we go through. And I think they like the size of the audience. I think they like the noise around it, because it fascinates him how you can't make any money, that you can farm a whole year and make 44 quid. It fascinates him how that actually the wheels of that turn that then go wrong to do it. So people have accepted that he's not going to go bankrupt, and it's not a Jeopardy show in that way.
No, well, was it hard to get Amazon to do this?
Well, like, okay, so we've all been together like 20 years, so we're like a shit rock band who all get a bit grumpy. And then when we re-signed to do some more shows in about 2019, Amazon were like, tell you what, you can all have your own solo show each as a sort of sweetener. And we were like, oh yeah, and like imagine Deep Purple or somebody, and like the keyboard player goes, I've got my own solo album now. And we all had this like ego. And Jeremy always wanted to do the farm. So he was like, he put his thing down, I want to do Life on My Farm. And everyone's face was, what? And he's like, yeah, I'll just, me going to work on the farm, tractors and like, and I said to him, they're not really, they're pretty nervous. And he went, so am I. This could be as boring as shit. I was like, he wasn't going to phone it in. He was going to give it his best shot, but we were petrified it was going to be dull as ditch water. But Amazon, to their credit, went, right, go for it. Go for it and go for it. They were happy. I think again, I'm coming back to you in a way that you are one of the great commissioners of your time. You spot stuff and give it a chance and roll the dice on it. And they were happy to do that because, as you say, farming, a fat bloke, it's like putting a tree down. Yeah, where, by any other TV imagination. You're like, where's the Jeopardy? You can apply all TV tropes to it and it fails on paper, but it didn't.
So that's the kind of interesting thing of like a big, important global, not streamer, owned by one of the biggest product companies in the world decides to like give it a go and roll the dice. But we should go back, I think, to when we first met. So if we go back in time to 2002, Tony Blair was Prime Minister, Greg Dyke was running the BBC.
Yeah, we looked it up. Ronan Keating was number one.
Jeremy Clarkson was doing a pretty old school chat show on BBC One.
Well, you say that, but again, that was one of your... Did you inherit that or commission it?
I inherited that.
Right. But it made him match fit for going in a studio.
Yep.
Because before that, old Top Gear, so anybody here remember old Top Gear? I mean, talking
They're too young.
I can see lights shining off bald heads. There must. Somebody must remember it. But it was a sort of TV version in the 80s and 90s and 70s, which was dull as ditch water, which he had been on and then left. And then we were like meandering around, not doing much. And then somebody got ruthless.
Yeah, I was kind of definitely, it was a moment where I just decommissioned Food and Drink and the Travel Show, both of which have been going for about 15 years. And
why did you?
Because we needed the money to do new things. We were like, let's get the BBC out of these old-fashioned magazine shows, which just, to me, felt like really...
But you hated them editorially, didn't you? There were...
It was so... Well, like, the Travel Show used to tell you how to book a plane ticket, so it was like a real revelation. Yeah, there was a little graphic came up on screen, said, like, talk to your travel agent. like
telephone.
Encouraging people to go abroad. It was... And it was kind of stuck in that kind of world. And this... Like the idea of TV is giving you information rather than giving you emotion and stories and all of that. Just information. So we were, and there was this great team, Liam Keelan, who is here somewhere running Sky.
Well, she's at another bloody talk because a lot of people have come dressed as chairs up there. So.
And and George Dixon and the rest of the BBC team, we were like, okay, what can we kill to get the money?
Yeah.
And Top Gear, which was that point presented by Kate Humble, who went on to do a great job on Springwatch, but really wasn't suited to doing Top Gear, was just like this is gonna go. And BBC Worldwide, which still made a lot of money from the magazine, were horrified, and they were like, "Oh my God, our magazine!" This is when magazines still really made a lot of money. We're like, "You can't get rid of it." And then...
But you were like the Red Wedding on Game of Thrones.
I was, yeah.
That year, there was just like heads rolling down the corridor. She's going, that show's going, that show's going. And Top Gear went, and it had to go.
It had to go,
Right.
it had to go. But then, and everyone was crying worldwide about their bonuses and stuff, and it was terrible. But then, out of the ashes came this idea of, could we supersize it? And there, the idea that it couldn't, shows were often very small. And I think one thing that I've always believed is to do big things.
I know, you
do
were...
big things. And...
Because you were, so the show that once was, that you're all pretending you've never seen from the 80s, it used to end with William Mullard putting his foot on the bumper of a car and he'd go, and remember, drive carefully. Now imagine that with what we're doing. So, as a train goes through the car. So, Jane said, like, it goes, and it doesn't come back until somebody gives me a good alternative, a good version. So Jeremy rang me, and I think we'd done something on BBC One, that hadn't worked. He was scrabbling around a bit, but he was like, we're having Top Gear back, and he rang me, he said, meet me in the pub. It was a pub in Notting Hill, lunchtime. We got there, and he was like, we're going to do this for Jane. We're going to do it. And he had about 60% of the ideas already written down. He'd been at home noodling. And he had the idea that it was going to happen in a place. He had the idea that there was going to be a track and celebs. And I think the bad news for you is that his brain is wired exactly like yours. You and Jeremy are very similar. And he's in a pod. And what he did was, he's very similar with you about it's got to be bold, we've got to smash everything, and then we've got no choice but to go forward. If he's like the arrow tip, I'm kind of behind it. Like, once he's done that, I can make it work, I can make it happen. But he's the one who crashes things out of the way. So it's like, he would say things like, we're not going to test a car until it's on sale in this country in right-hand drive. And that was unknown for motoring journalism. You went on the launch a year ahead to be first in a left-hand drive somewhere in Italy. And I was like, you can't do that, you can't do that. And he's like, fuck it. We're doing it to people who drive to work. And when they see the poster, then we know we can do it. We're talking to TV people. So he was right on that. The sense of place was good. And then he had an idea that we'll do the news so that we don't have to film a Golf or a Ford Fiesta, which are massive selling cars. So you feel obliged to do them. He went, but they're boring, there's nothing to say. So we'll just go, it's on sale, it's brilliant, we've driven it, it's 20 grand, buy. And then move on to film of a car that we can do something with. So he had all those pointers. He had the guest and the lap. We didn't have the stig. The guest and the lap. And we took that to you. And if I remember, your eyes lit up at the thought of it being in a place, because you then knew we could make a world. I think that was your big thing. You were done, not done, but you were like, right, tell me more, tell me more. And then we did that first pilot. Fucking hell.
That was, yeah.
Oh my God. Because one of the things that's a thread about, I think, why Top Gear succeeded was there were a lot of accidents, so it was quite organic, and that was one of the joys of it. We never had a master plan. We weren't like Mark Burnett, who could say, right, this is what The Apprentice is going to be, and these are the hit points. We just wanted to make a good Top Gear for BBC Two, and Jane said, I want 3 million viewers, so it wasn't like huge for them. So we had modest ambitions, and but we didn't really know what we were doing, so we did this pilot in the studio, and we built like a sort of Colosseum thing out of steel, like really fancy, like Saturday Night TV. Filled it with lights. It was July. And then we put all the audience in. It was in a hangar, no air conditioning, everything. Shut the doors. And so they're in a cattle truck, basically. And we had David Ginola as the guest, but we didn't tell him. Nobody told him he was a guest, so we thought he was a presenter. So he kept chipping in, and we're like, shut up. And then it's like, release the Stig. And this person who was dressed as a Stig, it wasn't a Stig, thought he was a robot. So he starts walking around like this. And we're like, oh, fucking hell. And then I think we sent you the VHS because we were so scared. Like, here it is, let me run off down the corridor. And Jane was amazing because she looked at it. She knew it was crap. And she we went to see her and she went, I just thought from the way you were all talking, it would be like a hangar when you can see all the wires on the floor and you can see other cameramen in shot, people walking around with cups of tea, and we were like, we can do that. She was like, yeah. So you were fantastic then, because you let us fail and then move on, and let's say you gave us like nudges like that.
But I think it's also about that thing of that period. I don't want to get to sound like nostalgic for that period, but it was okay to incrementally create something and improve. And I think a lot of the things that became breakthroughs for the show happened over time, rather than, I think now there's very much a sense in what you say is the Mark Burnett model, where you kind of want to have everything for the first show.
Everything's got to be ready to go.
And you've got to be like, this is what it's going to be, and that's much harder.
No, and I think because we'd hit that 3 million and it was like getting watched, we were safe. But then that globally level came along, and a lot of that was just accidents. And again, you gave the three of them time to meld so that their relationship is what it is today.
It was also about, I think it's something about like the BBC. At that point in time, the BBC had enough resources and was able to be very bold. And we did things that didn't work. We did terrible things that were just like, oh my God. And we did things that were like, we can see a trajectory that this is gonna work.
Yeah.
And this was in that category. It's like, this is promising.
But the stuff honestly, some of the things you never knew, like how cock-ass we were. I remember day of recording studio, Richard turned up with a huge black eye, and we're recording the studio. And we're like, what happened to you? And he went, I got in a fight in a pub. And we're like, you fuckwit, we're filming today. And we're like, what was the fight about? And he went, I was arguing with my mate about what the best Subaru is. And we're like, Jesus. So the makeup's like out here on his face.
But the moment I realised it was going to work with you guys, with the three of them, was that I went to a hotel to have a breakfast meeting. And I came downstairs, and the three of them were sitting there having breakfast, really, really hungover, having been to some car launch the night before, just like really looking like shit, and like eating like sausages and baked beans and stuff. And I thought that they like, they all went out together, and then they get up and have breakfast together. Like, this is like, because they want to share the misery of how shit they feel. And this is like it just has that thing of how people are together, particularly how guys are together. And I remember going back and telling the rest of the BBC Two team, I just met them all over the road, and it just felt like that there was a kind of, and that thing of really wanting people to connect and do it on screen rather than to do it all. This is the era of presenters who often hadn't barely met each other before, and it'd be like, how are you feeling? And kind of sort of...
Yeah, there was a lot of that. And
a lot of kind of like just met 5 minutes
But the old
before.
shows that you got rid of had that, didn't they?
Yeah.
Because there was no mechanism. If everyone's like, all right, I say this, and then over there someone...
Well, on a VT.
Bakes the flour or whatever. It's like no one's getting together.
So that thing of actually building on the chemistry and putting the chemistry into the show. Yeah. But I tell you, the moment that I kind of, for me, was the story that was the kind of revelation for me, was that I think that you guys came and showed me something that was it the Taliban at that point? Maybe it was the previous age.
Taliban.
And they were in the back of a Toyota truck, and everyone had guns, and the truck was trundling through the desert. But it had very branded Toyota on the back. And somebody said, like, we want to look at this. This is the kind of insurgent's car of choice.
It's a Taliban company car. It was a Toyota pickup, yeah.
And what can you do to destroy this car? And then you kind of went on a flight of fantasy across 3 shows.
We did. We kept, I was like, right, can you destroy a Toyota pickup? And it was... You're right that it had some kind of journalism behind it that's like, there's the conceit. You see it on the news every night. It's got 90 people and a 50 cal machine gun in it, and it's trundling along, and it's done 4 million miles. So it's like, Jesus, those things are unstoppable. So for car people, you're like, ooh, let's have a look at that. So we devised these tests. We like drowned it in the Bristol Channel and set fire to it and everything. And then your favourite was the last one, which was, we sort of rang around in London, and there was like a tower block being demolished. And who doesn't love watching those on telly? So we said, can we put our Toyota on top of the tower block? And we thought, we'll kill it now, and this is a good way for it to go. So, and I went down, I had my wife with me and my 1-year-old daughter. Why I thought this was a good idea, she's there. And I'm like, in a minute, that tower block's not going to be there anymore. She doesn't know any of those words. And then the whole fucking thing blows up. Loud bang, cloud of smoke coming towards us. She screams, she's in meltdown. This thing collapses. The rubble clears, and it's still sitting there on the top. And then we got it running again. And it never, ever, you could never kill it. And it was a big...
That was the moment I thought,
for
like,
you, that was...
For me, yeah.
Like your show has arrived.
I think probably things I'm still doing at Utopia, where I torture Chris Hemsworth in those kind of ways, kind of go back in some ways to that, which is to take something and do it really, really big, and then incrementally build on that, which I think is interesting. So
we did, didn't we? Because we had that. I think you like the fact that we could. Remember, we couldn't say magazine show around you because you'd banned the word magazine show. So we were like,
I was a tyrant.
Fucking hell, we are making a magazine show. So we're like, Jane, we've got this multi-item construction for you. And this is like, because we'd have the car tests for the nerds, and then we'd blow a Toyota up. And somehow we got that mix right. And then the glue was that studio where I think very important, and again, like, how many often you get this, those three had an attitude. They weren't just making a car show. It was the world of motoring according to them. And that was really key. There were two of them are columnists. They had thoughts. Like, James would go, all right, if you're driving down the road and you've got an Indian takeaway on your passenger seat and somebody comes out into the middle of the road, do you brake and lose the takeaway or just run them over and get home with your takeaway? And there's like, and the audience are like, do you really want us to debate this? It's like a serious question. And Jeremy wanted to put snipers on the motorway bridges to shoot people in the face who were in the outside lane and not moving in. Daily Mail next day, loving it. But we were like the more the merrier with the outrage because we knew it was nonsense and the viewers knew it was nonsense, but they loved the escapist outrage, I suppose.
I think that was an important thing about kind of what you do on all these shows is, and for the BBC at that point in time, you could have, we wanted a lot of different kind of attitudes. And I think that the fact that Jeremy always, I remember him saying that he never wanted to go into a building where there were people smoking outside because he wanted to hang out with the people smoking outside. And I think there's that kind of the way that the BBC can be a really, really broad church that can include lots and lots of different kind of audiences. And that was very much something that there was a lot of attitudes that aren't necessarily my attitudes, but I loved having all those different kinds of things.
No, it was a good run of you and Rowley Keating. Rowley Keating did not want to watch Top Gear. Jesus, it's like anathema to him. But he would defend us to the death that it was a show doing what it did. You know, he loved us, but he didn't want to watch what we made. But that was perfectly all right. And we trundled along. And I think that whole point about organic which requires time and requires faith, was shot through our thing. Richard's audition, he failed that audition when he came to do the show. And he nearly never was on the show. But he did his thing. He had to sort of talk with Jeremy about some news, review a car in the studio. And he was all right, he wasn't brilliant. And then at the end of it, we were like, right, thanks, we'll be in touch. And he went, I've fucked this up, haven't I? And we were like, no, you haven't. No, obviously you're absolutely all British, you know. No, you're brilliant. No, definitely. And he went, no, like everything I do, I fucked it up. And then started to tell us about his radio DJ career, where the highlight was Radio Cumbria, the through the night shift, reading out the names of lambs up for adoption. And he was like, that was how far I got with radio. And we were like, we were in fits by then. And Jeremy was like, no, we've got to have him because we'll make the rest work. You know, we'll make the rest work somehow, but we have to have this guy with his self-deprecation, which fitted our male brain thing of everything is, you know, deprecation.
But then we have to, so then it's all great, and then it's not great. right?
I don't know what you mean. I don't know.
It's really
We're
not
still
great.
making it. Like,
It's
Top
really,
Gear's on tonight,
it's
we're
really
doing
not
it.
great. And you guys, you know, Jeremy leaves, everyone leaves, and then it's like, okay, what the hell do we do now?
So we still wanted to work, and I think there was anger there as well. We were like, we're not done. And there was a tussle. I remember, I'm not mentioning any names, it's a guy called Alan Yentop who was desperately trying to, I think the mood was that we were fighting the BBC and they wanted to keep Richard and James so that we would be broken up. And they made a big move for them. Fair dues. You know, they were like, we don't want you for buggering off and making another show. There was a lot of emotion. Both sides we were like quite arsey with each other, so I'm not saying we were great. But we stayed together and then we were like, right, we need somewhere to go. And Sky didn't want us. ITV did, but we thought we'll never do it for the money sort of thing, because we were getting worldwide money to make our show. So then we were like, well, it's got to be America. And then Netflix and Amazon were coming up, and Amazon got in touch. And we started talking with Amazon, and we liked the conversation, especially the one about money. So we liked the conversation we were having. And then, can I tell you about the quiche? So Amazon said, right, it was like, make the show as legally close to Top Gear as possible, because that's kind of, let's be no bones about it. We want an oven-ready show to go around the world, but we ain't going to get sued for, and you four are it. So, right, all right. So a couple of execs flew over from LA, and we met at the Amazon headquarters in London. And there was like 4 of us went down, and Mark Devereux, our lawyer. And they had said, the Amazon people before we come over, think of format points that will make your show different, that are still not crazy, they're still Top Gear-ish. We knew we had the name Grand Tour, and then we were like, oh, fucking hell, what we're going to do? And then Jeremy went, hey, I was watching True Detective the other night, and he went, they have this tent. I don't know if anyone saw, please say you've seen True Detective. And there was a tent with a sort of preacher thing going on. And he went, we'll just do that. We'll get a tent and we'll put it up. We'll travel around, Grand Tour. We'll travel around with this tent. And we were like, it can't just be a shitty tent. It went, it can, 4 poles, canvas. And we were like, no, you got equipment and everything, sound, noise, lighting. And he was like, oh, don't worry about all that. And we said to him, like, do not mention this idea, because it's a good one, in front of Amazon until we've costed it. And he's like, right. So we're going up in the lift, and Mark Devereux went, Jeremy, mate, I remind you not to mention this idea. And Jeremy's like, oh, don't mention the tent, don't mention the tent, don't mention the tent. So we go in, and there's like about 3 or 4 Amazon people, and I don't know why to this day, but they've ordered a load of quiche. There were so many different quiches, and I'm like, oh shit, we've got to be polite. So I was like, James, you start on the mushroom. I'll do the quiche Lorraine. I was like, Hammond, you do the spin. And Hammond said, I've had lunch. I was like, fuck off, just eat the quiche. So we're like ploughing through this quiche, right? And then one of the Amazon people had said, you got any ideas for the format? And we're like, I was thinking, I've got to get into the prawn one next. And like, have you got any ideas for format? And there was like huge silence. And I thought, oh no, there's a silence. Guess who likes filling silences? And then there was like, I was watching True Detective. I was like, oh, no. So he then told the story, and they're like, great, that's what we do. And we're like, you fucking twat. Like, and the whole thing nearly bankrupted us. It didn't work. It wasn't worth the money, but we set off doing it. But I think the DNA of where we were with you, where we kept trying things, and they went wrong, and then we'd try again, and then until we got something right. That was our dysfunctional happiness, I think, that we did that. And eventually we did get it right, yeah.
Well, look, a good moment let's look at some clips.
Oh, shit,
We've got some
yes.
clips.
Right, so these clips, quickly, they're a bit of a mishmash. There's one clip that'll show you why we're going to pack it in at our age. That'll be an obvious one. There's one that I put in that it's James with his fish tank in his car. I just put it in because I can't resist it. And then there are 2 others where, one, we've still got the scale and ambition. And then there's one with Jeremy and Richard, where Jeremy's trying to get into a racing car, and this obviously never planned. And I love the way that their banter, their relationship is still strong at this older, fatter era. Anyway, let's have a look. Ooh.
Well,
Yeah.
after some very funny clips.
Yeah, and then that one.
And that one.
I think I've ordered that wrong, haven't I? End on a laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah, shit.
But like, so how you're working for this global company, how do they deal with things like that happening?
The health and safety thing. Well, we don't ring them when that happens. It's like, you know, we just keep this going because we're a little in our own little bubble. Actually, the guy who we hired that plane from, we had to convince him that we can drive down the runway and drive up his plane. That film was coming later, and I was doing a Zoom call with him at that submarine base where James was doing that drive. And I was like, right, you all film James, I've got to take this Zoom call with this guy. So I go in an office, Zoom calls up, he's there looking at me, and he's going, so health and safety. I went, we're the best. I was like, we are untouchable on health and safety. We've got such and such and such. And then the door opened behind and somebody went, James has had a fucking big one. And I'm like, right. So I had to go down there. But he was a Ukrainian guy, so he was like, oh, whatever. And, yeah, I mean, we do everything. We do all the processes. We take all the assessments. And we take the risk assessment thing seriously, which is to not prevent an accident, sorry, but to mitigate, and then you're good to go if it does. And so far, we've got away with that. I mean, we've had 3 big ones. Richard's had 2 near-death ones. That. Jeremy cut his finger. We've got that one. So we are getting to the point now where enough's enough, really. Enough's enough. And on top of that, there's the sense that we want to end things in our own terms, because Jesus Christ, when we started with you 2002, who thought we would go for 22 years doing this? And I remember in the office with Top Gear, we were going, yeah, we could get 5 series out of this. And here we are 22 years later. But there does come a point where you go, right, it has to come to an end. And we wanted to call it.
And so it is about to come
to an
end. So
yes.
Tell us about that.
So we'd done our last film. We shot that last September, and it's a very gentle one, actually, because it was quite a no-brainer in the office that we were like, right, what is this last film about? And we were saying to the guys, it is you guys saying goodbye. That's clearly what we do with this one. And they wanted to go, I suppose, unplugged would be a good word. They wanted to go a bit back to 2005 or 6, where there was no, leave the dynamite at home. We'll just go with old cars were always a big thing for us. We learned that on Top Gear, that they give you more TV than modern new cars. They give you more story, they give you more laughs. So they wanted evocative cars that they adore, and they wanted to film in Africa, because that was the favorite continent we've ever filmed in. So we went to Zimbabwe for the last one, and then we went to Botswana to sort of end, because our first big special was in Botswana, and we went to a place called Kubu Island, and it was always our most loved place that we, wanted to be at. So that was that. And then, yeah, not much happens, I would say. What? So anybody who thinks they're going to get Avengers Endgame is going to be disappointed, because it is deliberately gentle, but their camaraderie is next level. And I think you can see in it, they know that this is the last time they'll do this, that, and the other. And the conversations they have are, there's one where Richard's car's broken down, and Jeremy says to James, why are you helping him? We never help him. And he's like, and James goes, because I want him to survive so that I can see him in Panto, right? Then they start this 5-minute piss take of Richard being buttons at Swindon Wyvern and stuff like that. And it's just brutal. They're like, he's got enough dignity to say no in 25. And Jeremy's like, so Panto producers, 26, if you're looking for a buttons. And it was just ruthless. But again, I think they say goodbye better than any presenters could ever say goodbye, because they're so close. They're so close as people that they can take the piss out of their own goodbye and then be emotional as well. So it's quite weepy, and I think at the end we're going to show you a teaser. We've never made a teaser before, and then we'll have a trailer coming later. And the teaser is deliberately a little thing, but it is a bit heartstringy, but it just shows the mood that I think the film has got.
Well, let's have a look. Let's have a look.
We're having it now?
Yeah, let's have it now.
So, yeah, no words in that apart from the end bit, and there's a proper trailer coming, but we just, we felt that way, so that's why we made it. Yeah.
But I really like the fact that you're doing a proper finale, because it used to always be that shows would just end. I remember at the BBC we were always so terrified about being criticised because I'd killed something.
Okay.
Then we would just it would just be the last show, and that would be bye. You know.
Well, we sort of did that with Top Gear. It just wasn't planned that way, was it?
But
no, I know it's lovely. You're right that they were bye, weren't they? You had to just go bye because what else could you do? But we are lucky, and Amazon have been really good about this, that they will celebrate our goodbye-ness. Like when we're having a press launch in a month or so, and they're like, do you want to get any old Top Gear clips for it? Which I think is really gracious of them, that they're not going, Amazon corporate, grab all the limelight of the whole thing. It's really lovely that they're kind of an institution now, they're part of the furniture, and they are allowed a soppy goodbye.
But it is interesting, like we're talking about Amazon, I do think that all of the 3 shows that we've talked about here today, there is moments of just corporate bravery, of the BBC Worldwide getting behind Top Gear, Amazon getting behind what they thought was going to be the tent forever,
yeah.
and kind of at that point when really, really tough moment for Jeremy, you know, and for all of you, tough moment, everyone involved, that they dive in and go for it. And then with the farm, that actually to do something that just seems so outside any kind of rules about what would make a global hit, to kind of go for it. And I think that's when things like this are successful, it's very easy just to feel like, well, that was obvious, wasn't it? It's obvious that you put a lot of money into big global car shows. And I think it's interesting in the context of the festival to kind of be like, what does it take
How have you
to do that?
Because you made that jump terrestrial to streaming and become a big player in it. What differences have you, if any, noticed in the way you operate in that world?
I think it's interesting that one of the great things about BBC Two was the schedule, right? So if you had something that you wanted to kind of give some love to and you all thought was really good, then you'd stick it after like some whopping enormous kind of, what did you come after? It was on a Sunday night, I can't remember. But it was the schedule.
Yeah.
And you could always get like several million people, just as long as they were too indolent to change the channel, would just stick around for the first 5 minutes. And so and also in the BBC, that you have this enormous kind of breadth of people just listening to local radio, and look, you don't have to pay for any of that. It just, and that allows you to experiment. And I think that's a really, really important thing. And it's much, much harder to experiment with a global audience where often you have to pay millions and millions of dollars for advertising. And even then, it can be a tree falling in the forest. You can make an amazing show and it can not happen. So I think that thing, also I think the British audience is really an amazing audience. They've kind of been primed over the years to enjoy experiments. You know, like you see it in comedy a lot, that like people are really up for something odd and weird, and they were up for like, let's have the Stig and these 3 guys bumbling around in a big cavernous place, and they kind of go with it. Whereas I think that kind of, it takes even more bravery to put a lot of money behind, and the money is exponentially bigger behind something that you just don't know.
Yeah, and you were
can't
saying earlier,
shove
like,
people
you've
into
got
it.
your Chris Hemsworth series coming up, and you made a really interesting point about how if you'd have made the similar topic on the BBC, it would have been brainy, and now it's got to be brainy with
Chris
bells and
Hemsworth
whistles.
half-naked.
Yeah, half-naked Chris Hemsworth, yeah.
You have to kind of, I think the stakes are much, much higher, which means why I think that moments like Amazon backing Clarkson's farm, you have to kind of really celebrate. I think it's like, perhaps that's a good moment to finish on, but I do think that's a thing for broadcasters and for producers and people wanting to make things, is to find those little gaps where you can do something which later on feels obvious, but at the time it's like, holy shit, are we really going to do this?
I want to thank Lionel Richie before we go. Because we were talking about things we remember, and you know that whole thing about things growing organically on Top Gear? We got like our guests, and it was like, no, bless him, it's Harry Enfield or something like that, and Harry would come down and we knew him in the pub and everything. And our first international guest, like globally known, was Lionel Richie. So we were like, cracked it. And we said, right, well, we better get him a motorhome, because that's what celebs have, is a motorhome. So the production manager, tightest bastard I've ever worked with, he used to get those 4-finger Kit Kats and cut them in half when we were out on shoots, and then pretend that there was a factory problem. He wasn't buying the 2-finger ones. And so he got Yellow Pages out, you know, AAA motorhomes, and they went, well, they start at 200, well, I'll have one of them. And this thing turned up, and then Lionel turns up with the angriest, stroppiest LA manager I've ever seen of anybody. So he's going round doing the laps in the Suzuki Liana, and it's piss wet day, and the wind is like that, and I'm standing next to this LA manager, and he's like, so this is a big show, huh? And I'm like, yeah. And he's just watching this crap in front of him. And then Lionel came past us at about 70 miles an hour, and the whole front wheel came off the car, and it went ploughing through the field towards a sort of bank of runway landing lights. And Lionel gets around it, and the guy's going, what the fuck? And I'm like, well, he's fine, so let's get him over to the motorhome, because we booked a motorhome, right? So Lionel didn't mind, he thought it was all really funny. So we go to the motorhome, and I'm like, the motorhome, and I open the door, and I'm like, the full John Cleese. I'm like, I sort of felt the mildew come out, but I was like, it's gonna be good. And I went, the motorhome, and they walked in, and I hadn't been in, and I heard the manager go, what the fuck is this? And I looked around, and there was like one Athena poster of the Twin Towers on the wall, and that was it. So he was like, are you trying to be funny? I'm like, no, we didn't. And he was cross the rest of the day, but Lionel was brilliant. And every time we spoke to him, he'd go, oh, ow, my neck, get the lawyers, get the lawyers. And I was like, I'm so sorry about everything that's happened. And he went, look, I used to tour in the early 60s and the late 50s with bands like in segregated South, where we were getting stoned and bricks thrown at us and everything. And he's like, you know, everyone thinks I live in, you know, Hollywood with mansions, and yes, I do. But he said, those were my early days, so your shitty car and your shitty motorhome are not a problem for me. So he was a real good memory, was Lionel. We like him.
Well, on that moment, I think we should finish. But thank you, Andy, for giving us.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you for giving us some of the insights into how you make these three amazing shows.
Will do. Thank you.